We're going to go through a quick journey of ambulance regulation history here, and the reason for that is I obtained two Whelen ambulance strobe power supplies, both in working condition, one with a wiring harness, one without, but definitely enough there to at least make one work, and that's what this journey is. Plus a little history lesson if you read along about why these supplies were created and how the federal regulations made it really hard to use strobes on ambulances for a while, based on the unbalanced nature, and the A, B, and C regulations that changed the number of heads a little bit, but basically left it so that you had a completely unbalanced number of heads flashing. And Whelen dealt with that with the product that I'll be playing with, which is a sequenced strobe power supply rack. And you'll see me first display it working, and then you can watch me troubleshoot it later in the video. I hope looking at these drawings you can kind of understand how the sequencing works and why the rack and sequencer were in fact necessary. This video centers around the Whelen Model 11 and Model 14 strobe systems. These were a direct response to the K requirements of the federal government, which made it very hard to use strobes in a manner compliant with their regulations. The sequencing made a very unbalanced load. At some point you could be flashing 8 heads against 1 head, so the Whelen Engineering Company went about trying to figure out a way to do that. It all ended with this final product, which actually linked together existing supplies. For the purpose of testing, I used some lights that aren't exactly what they're supposed to be. These should all be red, and they are the right size at least. These are correct. The center amber, the center white, and the grill lights, those would be correct both in color and in size. And as you can see, this is the unbalanced section where just the single amber is flashing against the other 8 corner lights. This is what the experiment I did looked like in primary mode. Those are what lights were flashing. And then we did the same experiment in secondary mode. So I'll leave you with the finished experiment first, and if you want to watch till the end where I worked on it. Okay, finally functioning fully properly. We've got 8 heads flashing against 6 heads, as shown by the LED indicators here on the sequencer. Power supply sequenced by a master sequencer. This is an ambulance strobe power supply, and it is filled with these 2 head single units, and there's the sequencer. So in primary mode, you're going to get those represent grill and intersection, center clear, and rear amber. And these colorful fellas represent your 4 corner box lights, which would be all red. Whelen's idea with this is to follow that federal ambulance standard. Not all departments actually follow that, but this was to make strobes compatible and compliant with that standard. Putting it into secondary mode turns off the center white light and the grill lights. So now we've got secondary mode, which is literally 8 corner box lights flashing against a single amber center light in the rear, which is a very unbalanced power supply, which is what the sequencer's for. That final outcome did not come without some trial and error, some repairs, some process. I have kept both pictures and a video record of some of the testing here. I don't think I captured any of the really good snap, crackles, and pops, but I do show one of the errors that I kept getting, which ended up being traced down to something really simple and stupid. I actually had two of these Model 14s, so I was able to steal parts. I had a 1989 and early 1990 to 91 model, and I went through stealing parts and pieces as need be, and I actually have it repaired now so that I have two complete systems. One's just missing the wiring and controls. These are interesting systems, and I hope you enjoy watching me troubleshoot getting one of them up and running again. Okay, this is an old Whelen ambulance strobe power supply. It's K compliant, which means you get primary mode, where you have all the lights flashing, including the center clear and the grill and the intersectors. And you get secondary mode, where you lose your grill intersector and lose your front clear. It was hard to do that with strobes, so they actually made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 something power supplies in one and synchronized them. I have the wrong bulbs hooked up, so we're not going to run this for very long. But let's just say this. There's your center white. There's your rear amber. These 4 lights on the ground would be your grills and intersections. Yeah, I know it's a mess. And all the other lights over here are your corner box lights, okay? So let's have a go at how this holds up. I hope you can see that we have every single light flashing, and we are alternating the grill lights and the center clear against the box lights, which, yeah, this is going to be impossible to see, but it's happening. And then we switch to secondary mode, and our white goes away. I promise you, our white has gone away. It's our amber that's still flashing. The white's gone away, and we've lost our grill lights. So this thing is working just like it's supposed to. In secondary mode, you can see it's not flashing the 5 lights it's not supposed to flash. So if we put this into primary mode, you're going to see that this is actually flashing all of the lights it's supposed to flash. It's actually missing one. I'll have to investigate that. But long story short, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So after getting some proper strobes and swapping out this supply, which was really easy to do, all my heads seem to be firing properly, which is pretty interesting. And I can drop to secondary mode. That works as it should. So it's kind of interesting. I'm going to see if I need to swap out any other sections here, but I need to go to more appropriate bulbs. So these swap outs are just as simple as pulling the power supply out of the dock. And I've been doing a few of these because the power supplies have been making some sort of noises of failure. So I've been swapping supplies in. We'll see if that changes anything. Pretty simple process. Everything's working as it should in both primary and secondary modes. You've got all of your indicators as they should be. It's really a pretty interesting system. Really what I think helped was getting all the same length strobe tubes. But I have some repairs to make on some of these supplies, and then we'll set up in a place where it can actually be seen. But it's an interesting device nonetheless. Okay, so one of the things I ended up dealing with a lot on these is the
plugs on the power supplies actually pull out or back out or start shorting. So I pulled out the supplies and went through and resoldered all of the plugs. These two that are marked blue were actually absent from this power supply. It looked factory absent, which is possible because you could order these with certain lights not equipped. Some ambulances did not have certain lights, but still wanted to maintain the triple K strobe portion. A good example would be rear corner lights were often halogen, and so you would only get a rear amber strobe. There's other examples, usually involving halogen or incandescent replacements or standalone 8-head or 4-head strobe supplies for specific parts of the truck. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue pulling these supplies, all of them, and tightening all of the connections. I'm going to put them all back together. We're going to wheel it into the actual light bar room and try to get enough correct strobe heads together to accurately test this so that it has the proper loads on it. And I'm going to see if I can't figure out a way to test the one that didn't come with a harness. The synchronizer board has been pulled as well. All the connections checked. It looks fine. It's interesting. This, to me, resembles the portion of a strobe supply towards the trigger side. I assume this is taking into account all the strobes and triggering their triggers, if that makes any sense. Maybe someone will need to correct me, but it also is where the fan for the unit's located, so there's that. So I'm going to pull the rest of these supplies, double check their connections, and we'll wheel this into the light bar room with at least one of them buttoned up and start trying to connect up enough lights to fully test it. And so one last look here on the bench. Here we are pulled apart from our quote donor module or model. Didn't come with any wiring harnesses, and making wiring harnesses for these is pretty in-depth, so I'm not gonna. However, all of these are the same as all of these, which are the power supplies and sequencers in the working model. So essentially what I have is parts for two. Actually, I have a little bit more. I've pulled some extra parts from other power supplies. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 heads total. Like I said, this one with the two blue was missing the upper rear corners of the back of the box. They were not used in this system. I believe this system would have had halogen or incandescent flashers up there, but they can be added because everything's there for them. There's nothing different about the power supplies that had those than those that didn't. Throughout these, the capacitors vary quite a bit in color and model, but they're all the same rating, so that doesn't matter either. So there's really nothing different about. You got the same triggers, you've got the same transformers, capacitors, everything's the same on all of these. It's just if you don't have an output on one of them, it just doesn't exist. So I just soldered it in. So as of right now, we have two systems that are both 14 head and both with working sequencers. So should something actually fail on my primary one, I'm just going to start switching it out with these. I'm going to go through and put a little Sharpie mark on the power supplies on the inside of these because this is 1989, this is 91, I want to say, were the dates on the papers. They're almost identical, but I'm gonna just mark them to see how many parts I switch out. Okay, we are now to the point where we're going to start hooking stuff up. I have 8 corner box lights. Yes, I know they're not all red, and they're not all max beam, but we're in luck. The 810 series strobe has a very similar sized strobe tube to the max beam, so they're going to stand in. We've got our front center clear, our center rear amber, and our 4 grill and intersection lights. Remember, these 6, the rear amber, the front clear, the grill and intersection, are supposed to flash against the 8 corner box lights until secondary mode is activated, at which time the grill and intersection lights go off, the front clear goes off, but the rear amber remains on, which is an 8 against 1 flash, which is why this needs a sequencer. So we're going to start hooking it all up, which we'll try not to make spaghetti. Okay, this one goes out to anyone who ever had a critical ambulance call, thought they did an excellent job, got to the hospital, and realized you made Medgetty. Just literally the patient completely tied up in wires and tubes to the point where it takes longer to untangle them to give the report to the trauma team. However, everything is hooked up, so we're going to give this a test run here, and we'll see what blinks. Okay, after a couple power supply swap outs here because of sparks or fire or whatever, we have everything flashing, which is a feat as in of itself. Everything is flashy like it's supposed to in primary mode. So in secondary mode, everything that's supposed to be flashing is flashing. I still get that lag on one of the LEDs on the one power supply, no matter what power supply I put in there, so I assume it's the sequencer. It does not affect the actual flash of the lights though, so as you can see in secondary mode, you get all 8 corner box lights and the center amber, but not the center clear or the grill lights. That is the federal ambulance standard. That is correct. That is the way the power supply is designed. The fact that we got this beast going in a way that makes it at all usable is amazing. There's the 4 wounded soldiers that I'm going to have to see why they shorted out. And I've got some work to do, but with a donor supply, things worked out pretty well. We'll throw her back in primary just because we should. As we can see in primary, everything, we have 6 against 8 in our flash. 6 against 8, which is what you're supposed to have because you've got your grill and centers, front and rear both going, and all 8 box lights. So everything's working as it should. I'm very happy with the experiment, and I'm overall very happy with this 1989 to 91 technology still functioning. I wish there was a better way to demo it. I don't have a cardboard ambulance to put these on.
So this should leave you off right about where you came in at the beginning of the video. I have most of the system working. I go through and fix some of the supplies that I swapped out. Most of them were scorched marked boards from loose connectors, although that wasn't ultimately the problem with the one lagging supply. That was actually the broken wire that was left over that I was using coming out of the supply that I probably shouldn't have been using. It was a journey, and my bench testing method actually ended up working out pretty well. I used my standard durable par 36s and was able to jump the supplies into firing. for testing purposes. After all the repairs, you end up at the start of the video where I have the thing working. The patterns don't show up great in the video, even in the slow-mo, so there are some pictures here for you to enjoy if you really want to see some of the sequence and some of the flash that didn't show up in the video. So I hope you enjoyed the video portion, and if you'd like to stay for the pictures, that'd be great.